at elements of theory of change through an example of a program that is working towards gender equality across various spaces. So at the home, at institutions, whether it's offices or education institutes, and in a larger community setting. So when we are looking at a theory of change, like I mentioned before, we're starting with a specific goal in mind. And we are moving beyond overarching mission statements to specific tangible outcomes. So in this example, if you look at it, gender equality is a very, very expansive concept. But we're breaking it down and saying equality at home, at an institution level, and society at large. And of course, when we start looking at the backwards mapping, we're going to realize a lot of pathways to how to achieve this, how to achieve gender equality at these three different sort of spaces. It explains the why and how. So now if you look at this, when we're working backwards, we say that the way we'll achieve gender equality is through an improvement in knowledge, attitudes, and practices across different stakeholders, across these three different spaces. And we're saying that the activities we're doing is to increase awareness among people, to improve capacities at, say, an organizational level, in terms of certain policies to put in place, or at a home as to if there's any sort of how do you ensure equality at your home, or even in an overall sort of social system. So you're building capacities of people to actually not just be aware of what are the steps you can take to be gender inclusive, but also concretely tell them or build their capacities to take such steps. It could also be engaging people, so whether it's engaging communities or engaging people to kind of be part of certain conversations, or engaging people through helplines or platforms to actually come up with solutions, and of course have certain support systems in terms of how you're going to achieve this at these three different levels. So when you're saying gender equality, and if you're working backwards, you're saying that to ensure gender equality, I'm going to work on GAP, on knowledge, attitudes, and practices of people. I'm going to do this through these different ways of awareness building, capacity development, higher engagement, and support systems. But TOCs also, because we are working in such a complex environment, help us to come up with certain, or rather to identify and recognize the assumptions and justifications. Now you can work with people all you like and increase awareness and capacities and all of that, but you need a supportive, enabling environment. You need certain policies in place. You need certain systems in place to actually help people improve their gap, right? So a theory of change will help you really recognize and identify all these different assumptions about why certain change will occur because of your activities and programs, and what more you need to do to ensure that change occurs. A theory of change, like seen in the previous example, it recognizes complexity. It recognizes that we are dealing with very complex problems. There are several moving pieces. Change is constant. Context matters, but there are multiple solutions. Now, in this particular example, we realized that it's not enough for the organization to work at these three levels and to work with people on improving gap, or to really look at the supporting enabling environment. It's important for engagement with diverse stakeholders and organizations who are working with similar social missions. And finally, a theory of change is mission driven. It looks at the ecosystem as a whole, and it really tries to form connections between actions and your social change goals. And in this case, we also realize that another thing that needs to be done for a structured and a comprehensive theory of change is to do an ecosystem mapping. So it's mission driven, and hence it's looking at a larger picture. It's identifying different stakeholders, engaging with stakeholders, working to build a supportive enabling environment, then working with people, which will eventually lead to our goal. So just a note of caution, this is not a theory of change framework. It just seeks to explain to participants about what are the different things, or what are the different elements of a theory of change. Let's look at a few more elements or concepts of building a theory of change. Now, in this particular example, there was an organization which their key goal was to increased incomes among farmers. They said that the only way to increase incomes among farmers would be for them to diversify, to have more agri-allied services. So whether it is keeping goats, having more going into dairy. So they said one of the ways we'll be or even having value-added farming products they said that we need to diversify occupations. They will only be able to diversify into occupations, into other agri-allied services, if they see an improvement in their yields, so they can direct some of their energies to some diversified occupations. The way to lead to improved yields, according to this organization, was to improve farming practices. The way to improve farming practices were to improve inputs, whereas provide more or have access to improved seeds, improved tractors, pesticides, etc. So having improved inputs for farming. The way to avail of improved inputs was to have more money, have increased access to credit. They saw that for improved access to credit, they needed to have an increase in skills, which is increase in skills as to how do you identify the funds available, how do you mobilize them, how do you apply for them. And for the increase in skills, they looked at improved knowledge. For improved knowledge, something that needed to happen was for them to have increased exposure to other organizations, other farmers, their peers, etc. For increased exposure, they said that the best way to do that is to form groups of farmers. In India, it's called farmer-producer organizations. So strengthen farmer organizations. For these institutions to be formed and to be strengthened, they said that the communities need to come together more. So there needs to be more community engagement. For community engagement to happen, they said the process was to think that they need to mobilize these farmers and communities to come together. To mobilize these farmers to come together, they said we first need to say a proof of concept that okay, there are these, we've done some sort of a pilot program, and it proves that when farmers move beyond, like have improved yields, diversify their occupations, they can have improved income. So, and before the pilot program, they did a stakeholder mapping and a program design. So again, this is a very linear process called backwards mapping, and it is an integral part of the theory of change process. The backwards mapping, which basically says, right, for this to happen, what needs to happen? For this to happen, what needs to happen? So it basically creates all the necessary and sufficient, or other helps you to, or helps teams teams or organizations to think about all the necessary conditions for your results to take place. And this is a very simplistic model or a simplistic pathway of change. Why I think this is important is, and this is extremely simplistic, but when you start looking at a theory of change, and in the next module we are going to look at how the steps to build a theory of change, you will see that improved incomes will not, this necessary condition is not just diversified occupations. It could be several other things. It could be reduction in costs available for transportation. There could be multiple preconditions to achieve this particular outcome. All I need you to take away from this slide is that there are two concepts I need you to take away from this slide. One is a backwards mapping process, where you are looking at your result and then looking at all the things that should happen for you to achieve that result. And two, this backwards mapping process leads you to create a set of connected outcomes known as the pathway of change. So in the next in the next video, we'll be looking at the benefits and value addition of a theory of change, and then moving on to the steps to develop your own program or organization's theory of change. Thank you.